All right, Heraclitus. So, here is our passage, and this is what we do. In passages, we just take a passage from various sources, and we talk about it. And it's very popular. It's popular for me, and this is the third summer now we've been doing passages. And this is from, well, a collection of fragments, which, as you'll see, is perfect. Because Heraclitus should not have a long treatise. He should just have fragments. I find myself in my own path that I like fragments better than complete systems and prose and arguments. I like fragments. They're more poetic. And so closer to the truth, as Cleanth Brooks and Mandy Kahn might say. Closer to the sacred, too. By the way, I changed the gender of that, and it's an interesting change, isn't it? No woman steps into the same river twice, because it's not the same river, and she's not the same woman. And one of the great aspects of doing these lectures for you is to find art that goes along with it. And so I don't remember how I found this. This is the alchemy of Google. But how perfect is that? Isn't that a beautiful piece of work by Molly Van Avery, Damian Strange, and Michael Hoyt? No woman steps into the same river twice, because it's not the same river and she's not the same woman. Also tonight, I want to pair Heraclitus with the great Hilma af Klint. Oh, you know. Okay. Okay. Well, for those of you who don't, let me give you just a brief bio of her. 1862 to 1944, made her international debut with the exhibition The Spiritual in Art, Abstract Paintings, 1890 to 1985, held LACMA, 1986. In 1896, Hilma and 4 other like-minded female artists founded the Friday Group, also called the Five. They met every Friday for spiritual meetings and started with prayers and studies of the New Testament and meditation, followed by seances. And they were doing automatic writing and such. They progressively made contact with spiritual beings whom they called the High Ones. In 1896, the 5 women started taking meticulous notes of the messages that the spirits conveyed to them. And with time, Hilma felt herself selected for more important messages. And after 10 years of esoteric training within the frame of the 5, at the age of 43, Hilma accepted to carry out a major assignment called the Paintings of the Temple. This commission, which would take her from 1906 to 1915, would change the course of her life, and it's now changing ours. So the images tonight are from this series. All right. So there's a thing called the axial age. I'm not sure it's a thing, but it's fun to think about. So around 600 BCE, some interesting things happened, and I'm showing you some of them. So this is the time of Confucius, or Confucius. This is the time of Lao Tzu, the author of the Tao Te Ching. This is also the time of the Buddha. All happening in very different places around the same time, including the Hebrew prophets, especially Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. Daniel's in there too. And a group in Greece called the Pre-Socratics. Now, why I'm not sure it's a thing is because this is a psychologist and philosopher named Karl Jaspers who came up with this. And he puts the date 900 to 200 BCE. And I'm like, well, okay, if you're going to do that much, sure, a lot's going to happen in there. So I don't know. But it is kind of interesting. I don't want to make too much of it, as you can tell, but it is kind of interesting that all those phenomena, thinkers, ideas, emerged at around the same time. Jaspers goes even further and says the spiritual foundations of humanity were laid simultaneously and independently, and these are the foundations upon which humanity still subsists today. Okay, well, what's happening there among those many interesting things, including, by the way, some of the creation, well, one of the creation myths that holds us today, the Genesis story, is happening right then, especially chapter 1, is the pre-Socratics. All right, so who are these? Well, it's Thales, who is really considered the first philosopher, and these are sometimes called Milesian philosophers because they all lived in Miletus, in Ionia, or near Miletus. 624 to 545 BCE is Thales. Interesting, all these are very interesting and mystical philosophers, these first ones. And I know when you think philosophy, you think Plato and Aristotle, as you should. But before that, these pre-Socratics were, as you'll see, quite mystical and more in line with those philosophers from the East, like Lao Tzu and Buddha. In a Lydian military campaign, Thales was supposed to have diverted the Halys River so that the Lydian military could safely cross in the absence of bridges, so he could do stuff. He's a magician, right? That's what he is. Engineers are magicians. Aristotle relays another story, claiming to show how Thales defended himself and philosophers against the claim that philosophers are useless. Through astronomy, Thales, and by the way, this was all the same, right? Natural science was natural philosophy. Thales was able to predict a good olive harvest for a year, particular year, and that winter he bid on the region's olive presses. And since no one bid against him, because they didn't believe him, he put down only a small sum. But when harvest time came and everyone needed the presses right away, he charged whatever he wished and made a good deal of money, thus demonstrating that it is easy for philosophers to get rich. We just don't want to. And my favorite story that Plato relates is that Thales was stargazing one day and fell into a well. I actually knew a guy once. He wasn't a philosopher, but he was some sort of, he was a biomechanics professor. But he was one of these guys you hate. He knew everything about everything. And he was at a conference and was reading a book and walked off a pier. Respect. Thales argued that the principle of all things is water. And you'll see, and you probably know or remember from your college philosophy classes or high school if you took it, that this is what the pre-Socratics get bunched up as, is people, thinkers who are trying to figure out the one. What is the one behind everything? And that's okay. That's pretty much right. And for Thales, it was water. Everything is made of water, ultimately. Well, then there's Anaximander. May have been Thales' student, we're not sure. He invented the sundial in ancient Greece, which was incredibly important. He has actually a pretty interesting idea about what the universe is made of that is not unrelated to Heraclitus, and that is what he called the boundless. Aperon. Peron meaning boundary, aperon, no boundary. So it's not a particular element that he's choosing, like earth, air, water, or fire. he's thinking that the boundless is the source of anything, well, of everything. You can probably already see the problem here. You're just not saying much, are you? If you're saying that the source of everything is the boundless, well, we can't really talk about that, can we? Without bounding it with words, for example, or concepts or elements. But a lot of these pre-Socratics were very poetic, and that's how they convey this, which is why I don't think we should take them as we do later philosophies. I think they're largely poets, and they're creating a new kind of poetry, a philosophical poetry. Anaximander says that the boundless is the source of beings, and that into which they perish, according to what must be. They give recompense and pay restitution to each other for their injustice, according to the ordering of time. This will become clearer as I talk more about Heraclitus, but they use these words like injustice when something isn't at its full potential. It's an injustice. That's why I say it's poetic more than anything. Right. He also said that humans evolved from fish. This guy, 6th century BCE. Humans, what does he say here? No God created us. Human beings came from other animals, and he thought we were most likely to come from fish. Anaximenes, 546, again right in there. For him, it's air. Everything is made of air. And hot and cold separated things, because as soon as you posit a one, you've got to start just delineating that one, right? You can see this in our projection of gods. Polytheism has a multitude of gods, and they represent a multitude of things. Monotheism develops, and it's not that different, because the single God still embodies all those different things, which is why the God seems crazy, right? He's like, well, in 1 minute he's happy and joyful and loves me, and the next he's trying to kill me. Exactly. You've compressed all those beings into one now. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. He goes into talking about air and how air reshaping becomes eventually everything. Now, I love Xenophanes. We've come across Xenophanes before because he is the first myth buster. He really hates Homer. Heraclitus hates Homer too. A lot of these thinkers are trying to separate themselves from Homer and the storytelling tradition. But Xenophanes was really, he's like, this is ridiculous, talking about these myths and these gods as if they're real. He says, it is good to hold the gods in high esteem. That's Hesiod. It's good to hold the gods in high esteem rather than portraying them in raging battles which are worthless. And it is kind of tiresome, isn't it? The Titanomachia, the battle of the Titans, like, what's the point here? And then Xenophanes says, Homer and Hesiod have attributed to the gods all things that are blameworthy and disgraceful for human beings. Stealing, committing adultery, deceiving each other. We anthropomorphize our gods, Xenophanes says. And he says this. Let me see if I can find it here. If other animals, he said, this is what he was famous for, cattle, lions, and so forth, were able to draw their gods, right, they would depict gods with bodies like their own. There's a great story, and do you know this book, Ishmael, by Daniel Quinn, that came out in the 90s? Great book about mythology, and it's about a gorilla who tries to teach a human about mythology. And he says, what do you think the creation story of jellyfish is? And the student says, well, I don't know. He's like, well, on the sixth day, God created jellyfish. That's the story, right? You put yourself at the pinnacle of creation. Xenophanes would have said that too. He hates this. He thinks we shouldn't be talking about the gods or these stories as if they're real. There's Pythagoras, and I will do complete injustice to Pythagoras here because we've got to get to Heraclitus, but maybe we'll do a separate thing on Pythagoras, who's one here, as you probably know, is number, and that's related to music. He also had a really interesting following. We don't quite know what all went on there, but there may have been a prohibition against beans, because beans maybe look like genitals. I don't know what kind of beans these are, but there is a prohibition against white bread, I think, and they were kind of a mystery school. They were like, had these strange, unusual practices. All right, so again, we'll come back to Pythagoras maybe in another passages sometime or elsewhere. But here's our guy. He's really happy. Heraclitus, one of the pre-Socratics, not from Miletus, but from Ephesus, actually, which you may know if you read the New Testament. Okay, Ephesus. There's a letter to the Ephesians, the same place, never mind. Late 6th century BCE, was entitled to the crown, to the throne at Ephesus, and said, nah, no thanks, sounds boring, and gave it up to his brother. He wanted to seek wisdom. He was, therefore, a true philosopher, a lover of wisdom. He was aristocratic. A lot of these people were, the ancient Greeks were no fans of democracy. I know what you were taught in high school, that they invented democracy. They did, but that was much later. Plato thought democracy was one of the worst forms of government. Okay. He favored a timocracy, that only the people of honor and merit would rule. Let's not get into any of that tonight. Plato called him incoherent, illogical. Aristotle called him, I'm already interested, right? And he was known as the weeping philosopher, as you can see. Not a happy man. Again, and that's part of being an aristocrat. An aristocrat is you have to suffer the ordinary people, and we're insufferable, apparently. Oh, well, I am. I'm not sorry to include you. All right, so let's get into the fragments. Now, I'm going to put the fragments up here. You should know I'm using Philip Wheelwright's version of the fragments. You can get all different kinds of translations here. So this is fragment 2. We should let ourselves be guided by what is common to all. Yet, although the logos is common to all, most men live as if each of them had a private intelligence of his own. No relevance to 2019. I'm sorry, this is just kind of museum pieces of philosophy. We should let ourselves be guided by what is common to all. In fact, I would say that the public sphere, the common good, is precisely what's under attack today. The very idea of the common is threatening to people in power today, not just in this country, but in others. The common, the notion of the common, the notion of the collective is terrifying to the powerful. And it should be, because there are more of us than them. And if we could just get together, we could do whatever we wanted. That's why the powerful from 2019 to 2019 BCE have been invested in separating us from each other. Oh, okay. I'll be announcing my candidacy. No. Right, we should let ourselves be guided by what is common to all. Now, I'm a good postmodernist, and I'm immediately going to question that term, common. But at the same time, I'm a good postmodernist, and I know that we can create that common ourselves, that it doesn't come from some metaphysical space. It need not. In fact, it's better if it doesn't. It's better if we create it. And we can create that common. There's a great book by Jedediah Purdy called For Common Things, a little short book about this very thing, about how the common is under attack because it's so precious and so valuable and so powerful. What's the opposite of the common? Live as if you have a private intelligence all your own. Well, if it's private and it's intelligence, you're automatically superior to everyone else. I mean, I suppose there's a way in which you can have a private intelligence and you can say, well, my private intelligence is equal to your private intelligence. But that would not be human nature, at least according to human history, would it? And he calls this the logos. Now, this gets thrown around a lot in ancient Greece, and that's good because it's one of those words that's so powerful it needs many different meanings and applications. You will see this in the New Testament. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God, which comes across in English usually as the Word. And it does mean that. It's also the study of, as in psychology, the study of the soul, psychologos. But for Heraclitus, I think it was, well, you're going to see. It's not so substantial. It's not so static. It's more like the Tao, which is not a thing, but a way, a force, an active, dynamic entity that's always moving and always flowing. Wow, I better speed up, huh? Oh, did I go too far? Sorry. Trying out some new slide things tonight. Don't have my game down yet. Love these Homa Flint stuff. It's so amazing. You should look her up online. Incredible work. Okay. Sorry. Men who love wisdom should acquaint themselves with a great many particulars. I love this. In my own granted misunderstanding of Eastern traditions, this is where I get lost. Because I hear the Upanishads or the Tao Te Ching or the Dhammapada, I hear them talk about the one, and what I say is, hey, what about the many? And I think this is my failing because the teachings are there, but I have a good friend who just visited me recently, and he's always talking about the one. And it makes me nervous, Mr. Nervous. It makes me nervous to hear somebody talk about the one because it means I have to give up, in my mind, it means I have to give up the particular. And isn't the one in the particular too? It has to be, right? So again, I think I'm misunderstanding this, but I think I'm not alone as a Westerner in thinking that we make the one a dual, like it's the one or nothing. But as Heraclitus says, we should acquaint ourselves with a great many particulars because the one is there too. And so when you're meditating, experiencing, relishing in a thing, you are not separate from the one. You are experiencing the one in the thing. Very important, for me at least. Let us not make arbitrary conjectures about the greatest matters. All right, well, that seems obvious, but I don't think anything's obvious anymore. So this was before Twitter. Let us not make arbitrary conjectures about the greatest matters. Yeah, right? Honestly think that this is one of our currencies now, is to make arbitrary conjectures about the greatest matters. And I think part of it is the forms in which we communicate, which are understandably quick, shallow, and short. You know how Twitter began, right? Jack Dorsey was in a cab in New York City, and he heard the dispatchers going back and forth. And there's not a lot to say to a cab. Pick up at, Union Square. He's like, that should be how we all communicate, like a taxi dispatcher. And here we are, we're doing it, right? And that's fine if you want to say, hey, would you stop and get the dry cleaning or pick up this passenger at Grand Central Station? But we didn't do that, did we? We make arbitrary conjectures about the greatest matters. If you can see this in Twitter or any form of communication, really, it's fascinating to watch, because what ends up happening, and you watch this, is about half or 2/3 of the arguments on Twitter are about whether the argument should be on Twitter. Right? It's about the form. Like, can I make this arbitrary conjecture in 140, or I guess it's 2 something now. How many is it now? 280? Okay, I'm the only one on Twitter. How much can we do within this circumscribed space? And that's a great creative challenge, right? I mean, Mandy works in poetry, and there's a circumscribed form there, and that unleashes things that you won't find anywhere else. If you just have a blank page, that's a horror for many writers. You need a form, and so I'm not challenging the form. I'm challenging what we do within the form. We try to make it do too much, and we rest there. We don't go beyond the arbitrary conjecture about the greatest matters, because you would think if you really wanted to know the truth or the meaning that matters most in your life, you wouldn't go to Twitter, would you? You would come to PRS on a Tuesday night or tomorrow night. Yeah. I am serious, though. You cannot get to the greatest matter on the shortest path. It just never works. Never has, never will. I've searched myself. Wonderful. Have you? I have. And it's not because I'm an enlightened person. It's because I suffered. It's because the universe broke me. I have searched myself because there was no self anymore, and I had to find a new one. I have searched myself because I don't understand, and I don't understand my place here. And I don't understand why you do what you do, to me especially. And I to be honest, I don't understand why I do what I do to you either. So I've searched myself. I keep searching myself. And I keep finding, but I keep searching. Because all things flow, as Heraclitus will say in just a minute. I have searched myself. What if we, forgive me if I go Marianne Williamson here, but what if we as a country did that? If we said, you know what, today I'm going to search myself. I'm just going to turn inward and try to examine myself in a way that's more objective than subjective. I have searched myself. Nature loves to hide. You may recognize this as an Isis saying, where Isis veils nature. She's behind the veil of nature. And so scientists and philosophers have often depicted themselves as trying to go behind the veil of Isis. Nature loves to hide. This too, 4 words. 4 words, if we stopped and examined. Nature loves to hide. What would that mean if we took that and said, yes, you're right, nature loves to hide? What's the first thing that would happen? We'd stop talking about what nature is. We'd stop saying it's not natural for X, because we don't know. Because nature loves to hide. It's not natural for a man to be with a man. I don't know what nature is. She's hiding. So I'm going to pause on that before I say what natural is. It's natural to be a capitalist. Is it? Because I don't know what nature is, because she loves to hide. Nature loves to hide. And thank the goddess she does. Because what if she didn't? What if we knew everything? What kind of life would that be if we knew everything? It would be empty of mystery and magic and searching. I don't think it'd be a good life. I think it'd be a terrible life. The Lord, whose oracle at Delphi neither speaks nor conceals, but gives signs. One of my favorites. Neither speaks nor conceals, but gives signs. So, again, all these relate. I'm sure you're starting to see the connections among them even now. The Lord, whose oracle at Delphi neither speaks, so she's not going to tell you what to do. She's not going to say, here it is. Here is nature. Here is truth. Here is wisdom. Here it is. There's no story in world mythology where that happens, because it can't happen. You have to earn that. That's part of the search. You don't get it. You don't get it from an oracle. You earn it. So, the oracle's not going to speak. But the oracle is not going to conceal. This is the beauty of the universe, is that it's not unknowable. But you have to work at it. You have to earn the knowledge of the universe, which is the knowledge of yourself. You've searched yourself. What do you find? You find signs. You find signs. You don't find things. Sorry, Immanuel Kant, we do not find the thing in itself. The oracle neither speaks. She's not going to tell you what to do. Do you know how many students have come to me as a philosophy professor and a religion professor and just a professor or just an old guy and have said, what should I do? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. And sometimes they get visibly upset with me, which is awesome. And then 10 years later, they'll say, you were right. Nor conceals. If wisdom, if truth, if meaning were concealed and we couldn't get to it, I don't know what the point is. I mean, I guess we could have tacos. We'd have tacos. That's good. We'd have damn fine coffee and apple pie and Twin Peaks. And maybe that's enough for a life. But thank the goddess, there are signs that we have to find our way. That is not given to us, but it's also not absent. It's not concealed. It's there. You can find it. It will come. It will be revealed. Unless you expect the unexpected, you will never find truth, for it is hard to discover and hard to attain. You know how you're not where you need to be? Because you're certain of where you are. I've never been a bigger asshole than when I've been certain of something. Unless you expect the unexpected, you will never find truth. Don't cheapen it. It's hard to discover and hard to attain. And the parallel lesson here is give yourself time, right? So don't get frustrated. Don't give up. You know, one of my favorite stories from the ancient world is the golden ass. The man who's messing around with magic and he gets turned into an ass. I mean, I know the meanings just multiply in this story. And he goes through the worst things. It's horrible. It's just the worst. And every time he goes through something horrible, he's beaten almost to death or whatever. And then he's rescued and he gets put in a barn or something. And then the line at the end of the section is, just when I thought fortune had favored me. And then here it comes again, right? And the only virtue the ass has is that he keeps going. He keeps going. Unless you expect the unexpected, you will never find truth, for it is hard to discover and hard to attain. And the ending of that story, by the way, I should not neglect. He actually accidentally eats a bunch of roses, which happened to be an offering to Isis. And he gets turned back into a human being. In fact, he becomes a priest in the cult of Isis. He was an ass, and now he's a priest. I was with someone once. She was having a hard time. And I said, you know, Heraclitus says all things flow. And she said, thank God. Everything flows and nothing abides. Everything gives way and nothing stays fixed. This is the key. So much of what we do is about not flowing, about standing still, about trying to abide. You cannot abide. The world is in flux. Everything flows. Everything gives way and nothing stays fixed. Thank the goddess, right? Thank the goddess. Because, I don't know, have you ever been at a point in your life where you didn't want anything to change? Maybe. How long did it last? Right? Everything flows, and it should flow because it is flowing. Any sense of permanence you have is an illusion. And we walk around with a massive set of assumptions about permanence. And they're all wrong. There's a Zen saying, you suffer because you think what is real is real. Everything flows. Nothing abides. Everything is Maya. Here's the one you may know. You cannot step twice into the same river, for other waters are continually flowing on. I love that too. Other waters. Other waters. So again, this is our, especially in the West, especially because of some of these philosophers like Parmenides and his later follower Plato, we want to step into the water and say, that's a thing. It happened. It's fixed. It did. It's part of history and truth now. But what about those other waters? It's still flowing. You know? You cannot step twice into the same river because you're not the same. It's not the same river, and you're not the same woman. Thank goodness. Right? And you know what he means there philosophically, right? Because the river is flowing. You step into the river, you're stepping into a certain set of waters. And if you step into it again, those waters have flown on. Of course, that's the physical interpretation. The metaphysical interpretation is that you are not stable either. You're water too. You're always flowing, just like the water. All right. For Heraclitus, the metaphor, so you heard some of the others. Water, Thales is like everything's water. Air, Democritus is atoms. So, all these people, they're talking about stuff we have proven by science, most of it. For Heraclitus, you may hear that Heraclitus thinks that all things are made of fire, and he kind of does, but you should understand that this is more metaphor than anything. It's a metaphor for change. All things flow. Fire's a perfect metaphor for that. He says this: there is exchange of all things for fire, and of fire for all things, as there is of wares for gold and gold for wares. So you see, he's clearly making this a metaphor. This universe, which is the same for all, has not been made by any god or man, but it always has been, is, and will be an ever-living fire, kindling itself by regular measures and going out by regular measures. The phases of fire are craving and satiety, craving and satisfaction. Craving and satisfaction. You can go right from there to Sigmund Freud, if you want. I mean, I guess there's no reason you'd want to do that, but Freud's whole understanding of the psyche is this: tension, release, craving and satiety, craving and satisfaction. That's Heraclitus in the 6th century. Empedocles, another pre-Socratic, would come along and make this a kind of fourfold love and strife, and he's got 4 quadrants, and they're all kind of interacting. It's really beautiful, but the point being, it's all flowing. The fairest universe is but a heap of rubbish piled up at random. I love this. Don't get attached to anything, because it's all flowing. Everything is changing. The fairest universe you see is but a heap of rubbish piled up at random. The Tao Te Ching says the world is sacred. It doesn't need changing. It's a hard teaching, but I think it's true. The fairest universe is a heap of rubbish piled up at random, meaning it's going to change in a moment. So don't get attached to your image of the universe so that you want to hold it, or don't get attached to a negative image of the universe so that you want to change it. You could not discover the limits of the soul, even if you traveled every road to do so. Such is the depth of its meaning. Soul is the vaporization out of which everything else is derived. Moreover, it is the least corporeal of things and is in ceaseless flux, your soul, the soul. For the moving world can only be known by what is in motion. Souls are vaporized from what is moist. Soul has its own principle of growth. Okay, so this gets a little archaic, arcane, a little strange. These pre-Socratics and actually many philosophers were concerned with transformation, actually. So especially if you posit that there's a one, your next point has to be how things change. And so you might talk about how air reforms itself into water or whatever, or to the other substances. For Heraclitus, soul is vaporization. So he thinks that the drier you are, the more in line with the universe you are. Moisture is bad. Moisture kind of weighs you down. He has a little parable in the Fragments about a little boy leading an old drunk man home. And it's because the drunk man is literally besotted. He's full of moisture in terms of wine. And the little boy isn't. And so he's freer to move about. He's not laden down with moisture. It would not be better if things happened to men just as they wish. I mean, right? Right. I mean, imagine all the things you've wished for at various points in your life and how terrible it would have been if you had gotten them. Although it is better to hide our ignorance, this is hard to do when we relax over wine. A foolish man is a flutter at every word. I've been a foolish man a lot of my life. A flutter at every word, thinking there was some meaning in there. And maybe there was some, but I was over-determining the word, right? I was a flutter at every word, and I wasn't even drunk. So, yes, wine reveals our ignorance and our truth, as Dionysus would say. This is really important, I think, especially in our time. What is divine escapes men's notice because of their incredulity. Although intimately connected with the Logos, men keep setting themselves against it. What are we missing? What are we missing because we're not looking? What are we missing because we see and dismiss? I often tell students, if Jesus were here, if he were to come right here, right now, and stand beside me and begin speaking, he would be put away. Because we have no place for the sacred. We have no place for wisdom. It does not exist. We must transcend the everyday and the cultural scripts we're given, because there's no place there for them. There's place for aggrandizement. There's place for, there's place for everything else. But you cannot hear the divine without immediately putting it into a category of crazy, dangerous, whatever. Now, this is not a political endorsement, but what interests me about Marianne Williamson is how liberals, progressives do this, and I don't understand it because I haven't read Marianne Williamson's work. I only know what she says, and what she says is right. I mean, how do you argue with what she says? That we should protect women and children, and we should make sure they're okay, and we shouldn't put children in cages, right? Is this controversial? But immediately I see, like Stephen Colbert and the comedians, but not just comedians, other people talking about seances, and she didn't say that. I mean, maybe she thinks that, I don't know, and maybe she said it elsewhere, but she's not saying it on her campaign trail. And again, that's not an endorsement of Marianne Williamson. It's simply an observation of the fact that someone is trying to speak about the sacred in this presidential race, and we will not have it. How do we get so cynical about the sacred? I understand being cynical about God, about the particular manifestations of the sacred. But how do we get so cynical about the possibility of the sacred? Can we not talk about this?
Maybe it's ignorance, not cynicism.
Maybe it's ignorance, not cynicism. Yeah, I'm giving them too much credit by calling them cynics. Okay. Well, what I know is this. What is divine escapes our notice because we don't believe. And although intimately connected already We are already connected with the sacred. It's not like we have to go find it. It's here. It's here. We keep setting ourselves against it. Feeling very preachy tonight. I'm sorry. It feels very sermon-y. I didn't mean for it to be. Immortals become mortals. Mortals become immortals. They live in each other's death and die in each other's life. Told you it was poetry. Immortals become mortals. Mortals become immortals. They live in each other's death and die in each other's life. I'm just going to let that sit there. I don't think I need to comment on that. Greater dooms win greater destinies. You ever had a great doom? I know it's a cliche, but it's the truth of cliche, right? Is that they can win greater destinies. Certainly there are great dooms for which you cannot recover. He's not talking about a Platonic truth here. He's talking about a rhetorical truth, that many of your dooms, this is hyperbole, many of your dooms can lead to your greatest destiny. The losses I've suffered in my life led me here. And that's good for me. I'm not saying it's good for you. Don't misinterpret. I'm saying this destiny, I feel called to do this work with my friends here who also, I think, feel called, the staff here. And I wouldn't have been here without the enormous and deep losses I've suffered. It's all right. Sorry to get so personal. Almost done. It is weariness to keep toiling at the same thing so that one becomes ruled by them. Same things so that one becomes ruled by them. Do you ever think, okay, I'm going there. I'm going to go right there because that's right. And here's all the reasons that's right. Yep, I'm going right there. And you go there and it's like, oh, okay. Well, I'll keep trying to go there. Because, I'm an American. And we don't give up. I'm an American, not an Americant. So I'm going to, I know, sorry. I want to keep working at this because, Oprah said, or whoever said, if you just keep trying, you can't give up. Some athlete said that. And so I'm just going to keep doing that. There's a point at which you should stop. According to Heraclitus. It is weariness to keep toiling at the same things. How do you know when it's time to stop? When you become ruled by them. Ever been there? A job, relationship, just an idea in your head that you keep working at, and then it owns you. Weariness. Opposition brings concord. Out of discord comes the fairest harmony. So if Heraclitus is right, that all things flow, that everything is in flux, that all this is in motion, and anytime you try to stop it, you're in Maya. Sorry, I shouldn't have Heraclitus using a Sanskrit word. Anytime you try to stop it, you're illusion. Well, that's awesome, because any opposition, any suffering is not only impermanent, it is also going to create something else, some sort of harmony. So again, Heraclitus is not a physics thinker, theorist. He's a metaphysics thinker. So he will talk about this in terms of material things like fire or other things. But what he means is that if you recognize that the world is flux, that all things flow, then all things are flowing. And you're not stuck. You're never stuck. You're also never permanent. But I think that's a great liberation. To impermanence is a great liberation from thinking that things are permanent. Out of discord, inevitably comes the fairest harmony, because for Heraclitus, this is not a reductionistic, this is not a solely empirical phenomenon. It is a logos phenomenon, right? So the universe is not indifferent to you. No matter how it seems, the universe is not indifferent to you. The universe is conscious. The universe is benevolent. I can live very well as a cynic. I'm a professor. I'm an expert at it. I can take things apart very easily and see through them. But to recognize and realize that the universe is benevolent, that it's not unconcerned with me, that it's not materialistic only, that there's a logos, that there's some sort of force that's holding it together, that I'm not just talking about dark matter or gravity or any of those things. That's the most amazing thing I think you can derive from the world's wisdom traditions. And it's infallible. There's no world wisdom tradition that says, I don't think, that says the universe is malevolent. It's out to get you. I don't think. Most of them believe that the universe is, what an amazing thing. That this universe that seems so chaotic, that's always in flow, the rivers are flowing and you step in the river and then it's gone and you're gone and it's all in flux, but there's logos. There's something holding it together, and that something is benevolent. You might even say it's love. The hidden harmony is better than the obvious. People do not understand how that which is at variance with itself agrees with itself. Because this is the other part of all things flow. That which is at variance with itself agrees with itself. We live, sorry, Heraclitus, let me let you finish. There's a harmony in the bending back, as in the case of the bow and the lyre. That which is at variance with itself agrees with itself. We live in a world, a heritage that we have of duality and dualism, binary, light, dark, male, female, life, death, naked, clothed. It's okay. I mean, you can go through the world that way and you can make shit like rockets and stuff if you think in binary terms. But if you think the world is binary, if you think the universe itself is binary, you're wrong, according to Heraclitus, because that which is at variance with itself agrees with itself. There is no difference. Fundamentally, there is no difference because all things are constantly flowing. And all things are connected by logos. And so it's all one, even though it seems like it's many, and even though the one is in the many. There are no binaries. That is Maya. That is illusion. All right. Back to our passage. No woman ever steps in the same river twice. It's not the same river, and she's not the same woman. Thank you for your attention. Thank you. Thank you. It's so good to see you all. Thank you.